Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home on the Star Trek Overworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the history, the ideas, and the possible future of the franchise. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you with us, Matthew, because as our local theologian, I think you can answer the question that many of us Trekkies have asked since the dawn of Trek, and that is simply, what does God need with a starship?
What does God need with the Star Trek? That's right. This we are comparing and contrasting Starfleet and Federation with some equivalents in that other Star franchise. I don't quite know what it's called. Fun, and some Tom-Paris-Foolery may well ensue. Just get the plugs out of the way. You can follow us at Ion Cannon Pod, Twitter, Instagram, EYEONCANONPOD. Getting all the Trek discussion over there. And also Tractor Be, my weekly comic book reviews over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Comics Sprout Wednesdays. IDW Comics with Heather Antos doing a great job as editor there. IDW Comics coming on Wednesdays. I review them on Fridays. Just one book this week, Strange New Worlds, Illyrian Enigma #4. The saga of #1 there. Next week, though, we've got another one book week, but Deep Space Nine, Dog of War #1 looks like a good barking good time in the comic world. Also, of course, we got YouTube memberships on the Star Trek Overworld YouTube channel. Super chats, and of course the Discord, the Star Trek Overworld Discord channel. Check the link in the description below. Okay, moving right along. Got to have our eyes on screen. Picard. I think this is up season 3, episode 7 or 8. Get into that. One little thought here. Joel, you were wondering with Worf's inclusion in this series, would it acknowledge Deep Space Nine? And I was really astounded, especially this episode came home. It's called Dominion. Literally dives right in. I don't know if you're able to see it, but
No.
dives right into the lore, the history of the Dominion War, and it's really deeply connected to the whole series. It turns out everything involving the changelings and the implications of the what's it called, the chemical warfare that they encounter has radicalized these changelings and tantamount to genocide, right? I mean, it makes sense. And so it's not only does it just reference DS9, it's deeply connected to DS9. And probably more so, we were expecting it, of course, to connect to Voyager and TNG, especially TNG, but pleasantly surprised by that. I'll just get your reaction to my comment there. What you think
No, I mean, I've always felt that, post Deep Space Nine really should change a lot of what we know about Star Trek, because it's like it really was like the Federation went through the whoppers, like they won the war, but like they changed, but I mean, there's always been some implications that there's always been the seedy underside of the Federation, a la Section 31. But this was essentially Alpha Quadrant World War II, essentially, and they, Section 31 did some pretty shady stuff. The Federation and the Romulans are now the only superpowers in the region. Cardassia, they're gone. Well, they're still alive, but they're crushed.
Yeah.
Klingons, they're weakened. So I feel like, and just Utopia in general came. I think if the sorry,
that's okay.
Deep Space Nine excitement. I never get
go into sick bay. Go into sick bay. Coughing up a little. What is it? Oh my goodness! What's the Tribble? Coughing up a Tribble.
Yeah, I'm coughing off a Tribble. I got my cat, so she's not cough up a Tribble. But that should like shake the foundations of the Utopia. I feel like the Earth got attacked by the Breen, by the Breen in the final season. So I feel like Picard being post Deep Space Nine in continuity wise, that should Earth should not, the Federation should not be all happy-go-lucky. Even though I'm sure they prepared themselves for the war, the psychological toll still remains, and I think that is really interesting, and I'm really excited. It seems really cool.
Yeah, definitely stuff we will definitely get to all that. How the Federation may have lost its soul during the Dominion War. That's a great point. We're definitely stuff to get to. We will actually get to it, but guys, I just gotta make a bit of a switch here.
April Fools, kind of, not really though.
Yeah, it was April Fools. April Fools. Here we go. Oh, I gotta get rid of this backdrop. This is terrible. I love how terrible this backdrop is, guys.
Make it so.
Virtual background. Get out of here.
While you do that, I'm just gonna comment on these for a second.
Yeah.
Brooke Jen goes, just starting watching the original series. Some Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. There are 800 Star Trek episodes total.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are we counting the newer stuff today?
Probably.
Okay, wow, that's a lot. Star Trek.
Anyway, so April Fools, guys. I know it's April 3rd, but close enough. I mean, everything you just said, literally. But no, this is the Ion Canon podcast, home for in-depth discussion on the lore, canon, the whole High Republic of the galaxy, far, far away, on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network. That was fun though. We are definitely talking about Star Trek and Star Wars together today, but a little more seriously. Bad Batch season 2 ended. The summit, Plan 99. Joel, you take it away. Thoughts on the finale and the whole season? Just one, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, we won't go too deep into it. We got plans. But yeah, wowza. Quite a finale. Tears were shed. Moments. I'll say this again probably when we do the big review. But it's kind of interesting of just kind of watching people's reaction to Bad Batch so early on. It's like, why are they making a show about this A-Team rejects? And now it's like we're all crying because what happened. Dr. Hemlock, amazing villain, great cameos. Very curious to see where season 3 goes. That's my short, unspoilery. I don't know why I'm keeping spoilers, but maybe because I'm saving it for the big review.
Yeah, saving it for next week. When we will do our usual end of season recap, getting guests on for that. Yeah, I will say, I mean, Plan 99, especially, we talk about stakes, talk about killing off a character and question of stakes. I mean, I guess I haven't thought enough about it. When I think more about specifically about tech.
Yes, you can say it. You can say it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. It's Monday. Yeah. I mean, Omega was just starting to get a connection to him. I think V was going to get a connection. Getting a connection to him. They killed off the autistic character. I don't know. It was kind of odd, but hopefully, I mean, we know the storytellers are going to make good on it going forward. And really interesting to see how Crosshair fits into all this now, especially if he's turned as well. So looking forward to that. Okay, quickly, Mandalorian, chapter 21, the pirate. Again, I'll let you take it away.
I guess I can. I guess you would probably do this, but I know I don't want you. You've only done enough singing, so I'll do the singing for you. Oh, Canada.
Yes, like
da, 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 da. Yes. Canada come to the rescue in Carson Teva. Carson Teva gets it done. No, this was a fun episode. I really liked it. Just pirate action, a little bit of New Republic, and I guess we can talk about it now. The cameo, Zeb. I guess in terms of official Rebels characters, not the first one I was expecting. I thought we'd see Sabine first before we'd see Zeb. She's the Mandalorian. But no, really good. I think the use of CGI in terms of just having a somewhat photorealistic Lasant, but keeping the kind of cartoonish expressions that kind of help placate the uncanny plateau a little bit compared to just full on live action performance and makeup like what Dawson is and like what I hope Quatchfinger's Lord Nicholson looks like as Thrawn, because it's just gonna be his face painted blue, even because humans even are still a little stylized, like their eyes are a little bigger and their faces are a little rubbery. Well, it's probably just gonna look like a blue human, kind of in that kind of way. But even like Sabine's gonna look different because it's an actress playing her. So I'm talking more like the face, like because even the prosthetics are always gonna look a little different. But I think kind of having the CGI of kind of more of a cartoonish looking Zeb, because he is such a an alien creature, for lack of a better term. But voiced by Steve Bloom, so that's cool. I kind of was like, is that really Zeb? I thought it was just another Lestat at first. It sounded just like Steve, and like, oh wow, it's Zeb. But cool. The pirates were fun. This was honestly the first. I'm gonna probably talk about this later on another podcast we can check out. But this is the first time I felt suspicious about the armorer. And I've kind of been her biggest defender on the show, but this is the first time I feel like, are you trying to get into the good graces of someone who could be the leader of Mando and be like the cultural advisor, the spiritual, like she'll be the king, but you'll be the Pope of Mando's armorer with a bigger hat.
There we go. There it is.
But that was the reason I'm like, this is a very quick rule bend. It's like you did that really quickly. And Moff Gideon's free. I mean, we kind of all assumed that was going to happen, but
we already knew. I mean, the on the anime Instagram.
But are we gonna? And it looks like he got Mandos helping him. Maybe some leftovers from the Imperial days of Imperial Commandos. But no, I thought it was a good episode overall, and I'm curious to see where the final 3 lead.
Yeah, I did wonder just on with Moff Gideon. I did wonder if someone really connected to Gar Saxon's whole thing.
I was
helping him out there. Yeah, that rule switch. That was a weird one. That was a different thing. But I've talked about this in previous weeks. The fact that she's seen the Mythosaur. For someone as deeply spiritual, as deeply committed to the beliefs of ancient Mandalore as the armorer is, I can see that being a convincing type of switch. So yeah, but also maybe. I mean, trying to compromise her values, compromise her beliefs, not because she's more open necessarily, but to help hopefully advantage her people. I don't know if that's even necessarily nefarious in itself either. Could be just doing what she needs to do to take care of her people. That's also possible. I wonder what Emily Swallow thinks. Maybe we should ask her on Twitter or something. I will say, why I saw this thing. Yeah, at first I was all okay. Is that Zeb? Does it sound like Zeb? I mean, the voice is a little lower. I think the audio processing is a little lower. He's older. Steve Bloom is older. I guess that's part of it. But my second thought then is, why couldn't they just do this for Cad Bane? Why couldn't they just do this for the Grand Inquisitor? Why couldn't they just, come on? You can do it for Snoke. You can do it for Jar Jar in 1999. Just do the right thing, guys. And
I don't think I agree with that.
I know not all the people will, but I'm talking about going up on Clanny Plateau. You can do that CG intensive characters. I mean, The Shape of Water won the Oscar. It has CG character for a good. I mean, a good chunk of that character is a Star Trek actor. I forget his name. Another Jones. They could do it. They can do it, and it's more a matter of, here's the character. This is what he looks like. It's what we know already. How we feel he looks like. Then of course, Carson Teva getting stuff done. Connecting, not in an overt way, just saying, "Hey, I'm just going to put this out there. Grief Karga is in trouble. He helped you. He helped Grogu. What do you want to do?" That scene on Coruscant with him and the clearly, obviously working for Gideon. She's obviously working for Gideon. That was juicy. That was really intriguing little bit. And building towards ultimately, and this is Dave Filoni was talking about this maybe last week or so. Ultimately, building towards the Republic's indifference towards the rise of the First Order. That we're seeing that already, just the different ways in which a proper Republic response to the Outer Rim, just like centuries before, just like decades before, the way it gets undermined at every turn, and that partly leads to the rise of the First Order, partly what caused the Clone Wars. The Empire provides a solution, says we're going to just steamroll through the galaxy. But then also leaves room for the First Order. I do think that is the function that Carson Teva's character really serves, apart from just being an awesome character and someone who really takes action even though he knows he's up against it. And it takes a toll on him. I think it's taken a toll on him. But now I want to hear his backstory. Now I want to know. Yeah,
I want Carson Teva to go rogue and form a little squadron. Like I don't know, a rogue squadron.
a second rogue squadron.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in terms of like CG characters, like I'm not against CG characters. Work for Jar Jar. I think the Cad Bane thing is going to be just kind of a differences of opinion. I will say for the Inquisitor though, we have a we know what a live action Utapau is supposed to look like in Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, I agree with that. That one just looks the cheapest. And I love the Grand Inquisitor in Kenobi, but it's like he doesn't even look like a Powin, just like a bald dude. They didn't even put like big teeth on him or something. So
good.
So they didn't even put like proper cosmetics. I do think I can understand why you don't CG everybody. It's we can do practical Powins. That's what they are supposed to look like in live action on Utapau. And I think the Cad Bane thing is just going to be subjective because I like the model. I thought the model was cool and scary. But no, I think they did the right thing, at least with Zeb, in terms of I think what he should look like. I don't think a puppet Lasat is going to look good.
You've seen the costumes, and those are awesome, but the cosplay,
yeah, I mean, no. Compared to, and then if Lars Mikkelsen is Thrawn, my guess is just you paint his skin blue, and
I mean they could do a bit of prosthetic under the eyes and whatnot.
Oh no, I'm sure they'll do prosthetics. I'm just
but if there's a character that doesn't need it, I mean Lars Mikkelsen, his face is already kind of there, so
yeah,
let's do that. And I mean, and also to be fair, he's only in it for 30 seconds or something, so
that's true.
A lot less resource intensive.
I get sounds that part. More like Zeb, and as I rewatched it a couple times, once I knew,
once you see it. Okay, one little bit of news: folks have packed their bags, are on the plane. We are not, but CouchCon 2023 coming up, Star Wars Celebration Europe, just a number of days away. Starts on Thursday, I believe. Hype and excitement. Obviously, there's going to be all the book reviews, book news, book releases, including wave 2 of phase 2 is coming out just in a matter of days. Comes out tomorrow, I believe, actually. So Cataclysm and Quest for Planet X come out tomorrow. All of that to say, there's going to be lots of hype and excitement. We will have guests on who were there to talk about their experiences. But Joel, what are you hyped for? What are you looking forward to? Hopefully live stream panels.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm hyped for. It doesn't feel like it's close. I don't know why. I'm hyped for it. Don't get me wrong, but just it feels maybe because I'm not going. Maybe because this time I experienced what going is like, so I kind of have I gotta get ready. This time I'm it'll show up. Just kind of, I guess any good comic CouchCon kind of. What is Lucasfilm's messaging this year? What's sort of the direction we're going in? Because last year was very much we got High Republic, Mandoverse, Andor, and Acolyte. What's sort of the future hold in terms of everything, really, regardless of what actually happens or not? What do they want us to think is supposed to happen? Obviously, Phase 3 of High Republic's coming. We're almost done with that. Are they gonna focus? I mean, I'm sure they're gonna focus. I'm sure they don't want to sell us and that's Phase 3. That's it, guys. We're packing up Pete. We're packing up.
They might say something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I want to know what is you've done 3 phases of this big old book process. You got, by the way, I got that Jedi Chronicles book. I love it, by the way. It's so great. It's lots of fun. But you've done so much of this, and it's okay, the third phase needs to be the final act of the war against the Nile and all these story threads that we've been dealing with. You can't just abandon this thing that you build, right? Unless you obviously we're gonna get the TV show soon, so that's nice. What comes under the High Republic banner next, if anything? Is there a phase 4? I don't know. I want to kind of know, are you gonna focus on, I'm sure they should just focus on phase 3 because that's what's coming up next, but give us a little sense of is there a future for all this? I mean, I'm you know, and if there's not, and then I'm not going to say, oh, it was for nothing, but it's like,
Mhm.
you know, it's like this is successful. I can tell it's successful. It's your biggest book thing you've done, bigger than NGO,
Mhm.
bigger than Shadow of the Empire.
Yeah.
What comes next?
That's saying something. High Republic is bigger than Shadows of the Empire and New Jedi Order. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I always am good with people setting out to do what they've committed to do,
Oh yeah,
and
we should.
to say, okay, this is gonna be this phase 3. They've already said, Light of the Jedi, Quest of the Jedi, Trials of the Jedi. That's what they've said. 3 phases of this High Republic marketing branding banner. I really do like what you've said multiple times is this is an era. This is an era of storytelling. They've already started to do things like that. The Yoda comic, for example. There's kind of a short story, or it's Tales from the Rancor Pit. Has
Young Jedi Adventures.
Young Jedi Adventures is the show coming out. Different media telling stories in the High Republic era. That VR, Batu VR, Galaxy's Edge VR experience. Also the Galactic Star Cruiser comic book, right? Has Burry on the cover one. They're already tapping in without the banner saying, okay, during the High Republic era and this time in the galaxy where they're confronting the Nihil, but they were also the Jedi were a revered, respected partner with everyone else in the Republic. Those are compelling stories to tell. They are. I mean, at least I think they are.
I like.
So I'll be okay if they say this is it, but we're not abandoning the era.
I hope not.
But this linear connected story specifically that we've planned to do. Similar point. This is shifting gears a little bit. Bad Batch. I think they're going to do, because they haven't said, and obviously the way season 2 ended, they haven't said what's going to be the end. But I can see them doing what they did with Rebels. And I think people are going to be disappointed. People are going to be sad to hear High Republic's ending. People are going to be sad to hear Bad Batch's ending. Good. Means we loved it, which means we liked and cared about the show.
Yeah.
People were sad to hear that Rebels was ending. But it means that they get to really tell a full, complete story. And we'll come around to it. So I think something like that. Here's the biggest thing. I wonder what would happen if it's Sunday night at 7 p.m. and not a peep about a film, not a peep about Lindelof or whoever else, just nothing. Can you imagine?
Anything's possible, man. I'm sorry, I got my I did the thing and it's still sometimes dead, but that's okay. No, I anything's possible, man. Anything's possible.
I would find that hilarious. I mean, like April Fools.
April Fools. I mean, it's all hearsay until it happens. It's all unofficial trades. Although the trades are kind of like, exactly. Got that too. So it's like, but that's I'm just excited to just kind of see in general, what sort of the messaging, because as much as fun as these are, and these are fun, especially if you don't want to go to the big panels. The big panels are just a big marketing ploy. Yeah, I don't, and I'm not.
It was like, what am I doing here? Except for there's John Williams concert at the end. That was fun.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. They are fun. They are great to be around, but it's also a big marketing ploy, especially the bigger stuff. The smaller panels are like the fan panels. That's what you go for like the community and like true fan expression. But yeah, like that's kind of like in terms of like what does Lucasfilm plan to market this year, if anything? I'm honestly, the thing I'm even more curious about than movies at this point is what is the future of TV shows? Because we're getting Mando season 3. My guess is Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew are going to really kind of be the first true thing to really build off this next phase. If
branch out a little bit,
but also kind of pull back the curtain. I mean, Mando's kind of pulling back the curtain a little more with the New Republic stuff. I think Ahsoka's going to pull back more in terms of like, Mr. Blue Man is out there. He's doing things. I don't know what Skeleton Crew's about. I love the directors they got because I love Spider-Man, and apparently they got like the Green Knight dude and like everywhere, and all at once directors. So it's like they got the talent behind that. We got Mando season 4, and although I'm sure maybe Favreau knows more than he's letting on. He's just saying, well, this could go on forever, and then season 4 actually comes out like, no, this is actually the last season.
They're Polar Rebels,
I mean, hey, 4 seasons.
Yep.
That's how many. That's how many it got.
Yeah.
It got, but it's sort of like, okay, well then what is next? I mean, we got Andor's getting in season 2. That's the last one. Tony Gilroy's like, 2 seasons and we're out. We don't want to do this forever because of our mental health.
Yeah.
Acolyte.
Diego Luna said that, right?
Yeah, Diego Luna said that, and hey, I respect it. I mean, I would have loved 5 seasons, but hey, I want them to be happy and healthy. Tony Gilroy's getting up there, and so is Diego Luna. Acolyte. That's that. From what little rumors we've been talking about, that seems to be a multiple season show. I don't know if Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew are multiple season shows, and I'm kind of curious in terms of this Mandoverse story plot, the big story plot, not just the individual ones. What's going to kind of continue on or not? You've seen my tweets of like, I kind of see this kind of like Star Wars comics where it's like, we have Mandalorian, that's like the main line. Then you got Ahsoka, which is kind of like Vader. And then maybe Skeleton Crew's like Afra. I don't know if they're going to do like a true crossover with like, here's the comic show where they all come together, like the Hidden Empire, or how that kind of
what comic books have done for decades.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of curious just how kind of they clearly have a bigger storyline for the era, and obviously, eventually it all leads up to Force Awakens. I'm kind of curious how that proceeds moving forward. What shows continue? Like, does Mandalorian stop and then I don't know, Ahsoka continues this story plot moving forward, and then maybe they come up with a new show? I don't know. It's kind of, I'm kind of curious, and obviously, will there be shows disconnected from the Mandoverse like Acolyte and like Andor? Like, does Kenobi get a season 2? For all I know, could not.
I'd be shocked.
I'd be shocked, but I don't know. Maybe they maybe does Riva get a spinoff? I don't know. Like,
I would be less shocked about that. Yeah,
less shocked, and I'd be happy. So I'm kind of like, they're not going to stop making Disney Plus content. That's for sure, at least. So I'm kind of curious, kind of where they go forward with that. And then obviously, finally, I'll just mention, hopefully they announce some new individual solo books as well. So, can see more stuff like that.
They likely will do that. And I mean, they did it in Anaheim. There are always going to be standalone novels coming out. I will say, you mentioned the parallel with comic books. I think they're also learning from Marvel's success of doing these one-off shows. That like Ahsoka, like Book of Boba Fett was wonky. We've talked about that, but Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew. I mean, these one-off shows that pull back the curtain on different aspects, right? The Space Wizards, the crew out in the middle of nowhere, wherever. Then of course the Acolyte back in time, and then if anything that might be the similar thing to Mandalorian could be like Loki. I mean, they were getting into another franchise already, but the things that do connect. Also, Marvel has films, and I don't know if Star Wars has films. Two last things I should say. Speaking of comic crossover events, the Ajax Sigma crossover event. Definitely gonna probably talk about that. I can guess the Broken Blade in the High Republic panel that was announced on the last page of the Blade number 4. Also listen to my Tractor Beam comic review, including on the Blade number 4. I do the Star Wars comics from Marvel and Dark Horse on those, in case anyone's wondering. So talking about different things coming down the pipeline. Speaking again, of course, of fan panels, maybe hopefully not smaller. Hopefully they fill up the room, pack up the room. Check out Chris Abbott and friend Dom's stellar bounty hunters, smugglers, and gangsters. The scum and villainy through the years, that their panel that goes to the fan stage. If you're there, the fan stage at 6 p.m. on Saturday, April 8th. You can have Ethan Sachs and Adam Christopher right in there talking about their stories. Karen Duggan and Matt Booker will be on that. And then Chris told me he's going to be uploading that to his YouTube channel at Star Raptor.
Awesome.
So if you aren't there, check that out when it's out. And Definitely enjoy giving that a watch. All right, let's dive right into it. Go back to this galaxy, sorta, but also not. Yeah, take it away, Joel.
To boldly go where no man has gone before, to a galaxy far, far away. Da, da, dun, da, 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 da. I can't do it. Yeah,
We'll try.
the Wars, the Trek. Two franchises that, for some reason, the internet wants to think has some weird rivalry with each other, and I'm like, I never felt like that. I feel like Star Wars, Star Trek, they're kind of two completely different things. Kind of two different tones. Like when people compare Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, it's like, what, just because one got sword and sorcery, the other got swords and somewhat sorcery, they're the same thing? Like, no, they're supposed to be different.
Very
But people love making comparisons and kind of like, there's a few. I wrote at the bottom, but I think I can start this. Yeah, I agree. I don't get the rivalry either, my friend. But I'll start with some few behind the scenes things that I kind of know of in terms of how they don't, not a rivalry, but they're really certainly helped, like Star Wars, because of its special effects in 77, helped kind of kickstart Star Trek the motion picture in 79.
around there.
I heard that apparently Discovery, because it looked so good special effects wise for TV budget at the time, that gave Lucas a little bit more confidence to like, oh, we could probably get away with a Star Wars TV thing and not look completely cheap. Good. Hey, the season 3 of Mando's got some pretty good spaceship battles.
It's some of the best. I was just thinking that it's some of the best space battles I've ever seen on TV.
Yeah, it's like
speed of it compared to Book of Boba Fett. I'm sorry to dunk on it. Compared to the speeder chase in Mos Eisley and Book of Boba Fett, these starfighter battles, mind blowing.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. Are we talking about Mando or are we talking about Star Trek?
I'm talking about Mando, but the point about Discovery, I mean, because Discovery season 1 already was mind-blowingly good in its production design, its special effects. So yeah.
Oh yeah. I agree 100% on that. At least on the effects line, I think Mando season 3's up the ante. For that at least. But I think we can make some interesting comparisons to Star Wars and Star Trek. I'm a little tired. I'm sorry. We're having to take a break, folks. You get into
get some decaf in you. There you go.
I know. So again, the light. Sorry about that. I think the first one I think we can talk about is the Jedi Order and Starfleet. And the reason I talk about Jedi Order, not the Republic, is and kind of weird way they're kind of this. They have a lot of parallels to each other. Just one's less religious, I guess. One's more overt, the Navy. Starfleet in Star Trek. I'm waiting to confuse. I almost said it. And
you got it.
It's like I almost said it. I'm going to confuse myself eventually. It's Starfleet in Star Trek is like the Jedi, and that they are very much. There is an idea behind it, but it also very much serves in the whims of whoever is writing it at the time. They are like a peacekeeping force of exploration, in the 60s, especially. Like, hey, let's go to the planet and, hey, look, we found some people. Interesting, cool, like, weird. These are weird people with half their face and they don't like each other. And then, their diplomatic corps. For some reason, Picard has families on his Starfleet that's also like a cruise line.
True. Yeah, that's kind of odd, eh?
And then other times they're like the full-on military, battles and wars and stuff like that. They're very much of the writer's whims to a degree. The Jedi, I think, kind of are like that in some ways. I think there's a maybe bit more of a cohesiveness to it. I don't know, but they're certainly like they're the religious monks. but they're also space cops. George Lucas compared them to the mafia once. The mafia. But he calls them space marshals. Space marshals. They they go to the planet. They make sure the peace is there.
Mm-hmm.
One Jedi can kind of take on 100 pirates. So they do diplomatic stuff. They guard politicians. Sometimes they have armies, especially when they're fighting the Sith in the old days.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it's just up to 10,000. Sometimes it's one. But I think they kind of function as like the Republic Starfleet, helping them explore Outer Rim world and seek out new Outer Rim worlds and Outer Rim civilizations. Boldly force where no Jedi has gone before. Unknown regions, the show. I think that's interesting. I don't want to say. I'm not gonna do like my one world is more cohesive than the other because I think they both kind of have that. But I think it's sort of interesting. Both the Jedi and the Starfleet kind of have that sort of. They evolve. There is an in unit. They can be retroactively in universe reasons for it, and then there's just that's what the writers like. I think the biggest example is Star Trek the motion picture. With Wrath of Khan, Star Trek the motion picture, which was full on Roddenberry. They had the weirder uniforms and kind of like that. Then Wrath of Khan, they look like a military and they act like a military.
Yeah.
So I'll toss that to you. Have you ever thought of like the Jedi and Starfleet as kind of the weird cousins of each other? Kind of, maybe not intentionally, obviously, but like just how creatively stuff like that happens.
I mean, it's fascinating. I hadn't really all that much just because you think more literally the Imperial Starfleet and the Jedi Order and the Federation Starfleet and whatnot, or the Imperial Starfleet or the Republic Starfleet and the Federation Starfleet. Yeah, I mean, so you'd say the difference on the surface being that the Jedi have this mystical connection to the Force. There's this more Eastern spirituality, if you can use real world parallels here.
Yes, certainly.
Whereas with Starfleet, it isn't a mystical connection to the Force. It's their philosophies and ideals that ground them very much Western, modern Western, the American liberal ideal, of
certainly,
exploration, consensus through science and reason, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. That's already then starting to get into a spirituality of inclusion that, I mean, especially that Discovery gets to, of inclusion, of optimism for better and for worse, of progress for better and for worse. But they both have this mission of the sense of they're there. I mean, they're the good guys. They're there to be the guardians of peace and justice.
In the Federation.
Yeah, in the Federation. I mean, Starfleet doesn't go beyond its jurisdiction. But, I mean, here's an interesting parallel too. Federation Romulan or Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, they all look at, I mean, Klingons not so much later on, but they all look at Starfleet as, well, an undiscovered country, the Homo sapiens zoning club, right? The Federation is they're the jocks of the galaxy, and or at least of the Alpha Quadrant of their section of the galaxy, and kind of this sense of self-righteousness, whereas Starfleet offers themselves believe in their integrity and the integrity of their mission, as we said at the top, until they don't. With the Dominion War, and with not the Dominion War itself, right? The mission to actually protect the innocent people of the Alpha Quadrant from this Dominion threat. That the parallel I'm making here is we have the Nihil, we have the Separatists, we have people who can at least latch on to what the Sith are saying, even if they're not the Sith themselves. That who the Jedi think they are, to be thinking they're elites, holier than thou, setting themselves apart and above everybody. That criticism is there throughout the saga. Even Luke on Octo, he has that criticism, right? Of course, Jedi themselves, Rey herself, especially everyone in the High Republic era, they all believe in the integrity of their mission. We are all the Republic, including especially the Jedi. I mean, Jorah O'Malley, I think of that one page in Light of the Jedi,
Mhm.
where she has this confidence of saying, the Jedi Council scene that I did that full podcast episode about. I'm going to follow the will, what I discern is right. I'm going to follow is going to be the will of the Force. I'm going to go out there. We just saw Barash Sylvain have that kind of certainty. The difference that we'll get to later on is Star Wars is a little more consistent. We're going to get into this in a minute. Star Wars is a little more consistent in breaking that down, in sending Jedi into more impossible, morally ambiguous situations. I think of what's his name, the Jedi who becomes a regent of this planet in Master and Apprentice. I think of, Mace Windu, and it's a little more cynical there. So that
it's interesting also in terms of like the consistency of portrayal with Starfleet that especially like in the movies and like by the time they leave Deep Space Nine, like they're the Navy, they're the military, and they've always had the ranks: captain, first officer, admiral. Yet in TOS in particular, less so in TNG, but TNG is a little more just diplomatic, about it. But TOS less so.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Kirk doing his thing.
Yeah,
like Kirk is like, I'm Captain Kirk. Yeah, you Admiral. Yeah.
Incompetent Commodores. Every single Commodore on the original series, completely useless.
Because only Captain Kirk knows what to do. Because
right.
Captain. It's like, just let's leave it to Kirk, and everything will be fine. He can totally break 100, probably a bajillion rules, but he's Captain Kirk. TNG did a little bit of that. In terms of just like Picard centric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there was always more diplomatic missions and like, we must protect this officer in person.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Deep Space Nine, it was they did it, but I think there was always more like, we know we're breaking the rules, but we kind of have. But Cisco's the Cisco, so Cisco's gonna Cisco. You don't mention Cisco.
Well, that classic one. That's that we've lost our soul episode. Yeah. I can live with it, where he has, he doesn't have, but the classic one, Garrick assassinates these Romulan ambassadors in order to actually trick them into joining the war, and he's
right.
I can live with it. I can live with it.
And Voyager, they're not even in the Federation, so they're kind of doing their own thing.
Right.
I don't know anything about Enterprise, so yeah. Everything after Deep Space Nine, I'm kind of like, I haven't watched it.
That's right.
But that's sort of the similar and parallel with the Jedi is that I think with the Jedi have always felt like I've always kind of been more consistent of like knowing that they're a looser structure with the Council. While with Star Trek, it's like, you say you're a fleet, you are a fleet, Starfleet, you are a military, you got an academy, you got bases, you got you got a structure, phasers, you got a hierarchy, a Commodores, but yet and I know there's certainly in like classical Navy stuff, captains got to make decisions. But you got communications. It's not like I know space is vast, but it's like you got communications. You can talk across. High command can tell you, "Hey, come back here. We'll send people to get you, arrest you." But it's like Kirk's like, I'm Kirk. Kirk.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is, thinking about the exploration wing, science wing. Right. NASA takes Air Force pilots. They are still part of the Air Force or part of the Navy or whatever, but they're still part of a military unit, and yet they're also doing this highly advanced scientific exploration thing. It's as if those things kind of come together, but again with the Gene Roddenberry ideal.
It is. I think I was watching an interesting kind of video about this, and Starfleet is essentially a super military. They are Army, Navy, Air Force, NASA, Science, Peacekeeping Corps, Diplomatic Corps, all in one thing.
So that's what I'm wondering why we use the term military, because that's more than a military.
Well, that's true. Well, they use military rank. They use admiral.
Yeah.
I don't know civilian, diplomatic corps like
Salvation Army. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe. I mean,
It's a bit of a joke, but
I mean, I guess that's kind of just one of those things about fiction, and it's like, they're weirdly not a military, but also a military. I mean, Kirk was an admiral.
Yeah.
Admiral Kirk, said Khan. Captain Sisko. So it's kind of interesting. They're like, they're a super military, not military.
I mean, that's again the parallel with the Jedi, as you were saying, is the structure. They become a military when they need to be. I guess with Starfleet, they're more permanently in that ordered rank, but they're masters, they're knights, they're Padawans.
True.
During the Clone Wars, they are generals and commanders, and of course, speaking of losing their soul, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, but even again, High Republic, they still function. They still give orders to. I mean, masters on the council can direct a knight to go somewhere. It is true that a knight, knights are generally free to do what they think they need to do. Although, then if they really want to be free, they have to become a wayfinder. And of course, Padawans aren't free to do what they want. But that's just how training works and how growing up works. But I even see that parallel that even more.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're Jedi scientists. I guess. I think.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So there's definitely, that's sort of like the two big things in terms of like Star Wars and Star Trek, which are weirdly similar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Star Wars was. I mean, I don't think it is intentional. I just sort of think that's just sort of creator synergy that just sort of it's in the air.
I mean, they're both American products.
Oh yeah,
and we kind of. I mean, American meaning Western. There's this, individuals within institutions, and again, we're going to go to this in a bit, but
I'll get to it now. Actually,
okay, we can get to it now. Individuals in institutions maintaining their personhood, maintaining their sense of what they're meant to do in life, and what they're meant to do in life is to work with other people for the common good and the well-being of others. That's the ideal. I'll let you dive into that a little more, but you're talking about Camelot and talking about the optimism. In a way, they're both products of 60s optimism, but Star Trek far more markedly is. Whereas George Lucas, he was saying, "To hell with that," in a lot of ways.
In some ways, yes. It's actually funny you mentioned that because I saw a really interesting tweet and I should have saved it because I thought it was really interesting. I should have kept it. We were talking, which is kind of goes back to an early podcast about like how the prequels affect the sequels.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they were talking about, or like I forget kind of like what it was.
Still happen to have that up there anyway.
Oh, good, nice. And they were talking about how this one of the things about the sequel trilogy is that it kind of is a weird mix of the original trilogy's overall optimism, but with the prequels is cynicism. And I think the prequels is where Star Wars honestly has more cynicism.
Yes.
In terms of just it's about to fall Republic, so it's got to be a little cynical. And George was definitely probably a little more cynical, even probably in the 2000s, probably because we were being mean to him, and probably wasn't happy about that. But also, 9/11, War on Terror.
Yeah.
He saw where the wind was going. It's like he probably felt a little about it. But Star Trek is born out of the perceived American liberal dream that maybe never existed of, America, we Cold War, we're the good guys fighting the commies, and we're the democracy. We got some way to go, but MLK is we're gonna have maybe it was a big deal, having a female officer, person of color officer, black officer on the deck, on the main deck, being treated like any other officer. And
Yeah.
Russian.
No, that was a huge deal. Yeah.
Asian
Uhura,
man.
yeah.
Then alien, kind of a little
Mhm.
bit of everything. That was a big deal. I'm not going to take away from that. But at the same time, it's like also, like we said, Star Trek is the Federation has those military aspects. They are kind of the super military.
Mhm.
I think, especially, Star Trek. I think the Federation is supposed to be considered the United States.
Yes.
Especially
Very
in
much
the
so.
early days, and even for pretty much all of at least the '90s existence. I don't know if modern Trek is kind of tilting that enough.
I mean,
or not.
it is, but in a very different way. I'll put it that way.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll let you kind of talk about like how modern Trek kind of turning it, but like '90s,
Mhm.
even up to Deep Space Nine, I still see it as like America,
Mhm.
and then Klingons are Russian, the Romulans were supposed to be China. That was always kind of the thing. They never really got away from that. I mean, the Klingons kind of became their own culture, but I think a lot of '90s Klingon stuff came from the fact that Soviet Union collapsed, and now Russia and Russia and America seemed to were going in friendly directions at the time.
At the time.
But Star Wars, that was born out of the '70s Nixon era. George was very much concerned about
Mhm.
Nixon essentially becoming the emperor himself.
Yep.
He tells the story of Nixon. In a weird way, I think Star Wars also is. I don't want to say Star Wars is cynical because I think that's no oversimplification. Star Trek is positive. Star Wars is cynical.
Mhm.
I won't say that at all. I think it has lots of optimism in Star Wars. I think its optimism though isn't as. I don't think it's as institutionalized as say
Mhm.
Star Trek, where it's like if Starfleet, the organization, you have the hierarchy and the borders. It's like Star Wars. It's like here's a bunch of hippies and radicals. Feel the groove, man. Feel the groove. Feel the vibes.
Like the rebels, you mean?
The rebels,
Yeah.
and they take on the big bad scary empire and their
Mhm.
scary Death Stars.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where their optimism lies, and I think a lot of around Star Wars has leaned into that aspect more, where you see like, Lothal was saved because Ezra and his friends and the friends they made along the way rose up.
Mhm.
The people of the galaxy at the end of Return of the Jedi, they all rose up. People, at the end, it's not the Navy, sir. It's people in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of kind of more of that radical people power thing,
Mhm.
which I think George was probably into at the time because it was '60s and it's kind of the '70s.
Yeah.
People power, man, out of Nam, get us out of Nam.
Yeah.
I don't think Star Wars, always gonna have a bit of that '70s vibe, even in the modern era. Just I think stuff like Andor can like give more of like more nuanced context to it, but I think it's always gonna keep it. You can't get rid of an ethos, as I like to say.
So one of the things I think we're dancing around here, then talking about Starfleet as a military, the Jedi with their lightsabers, the use of violence and this assumption that violence, an institution that has phasers, has lasers, has laser swords, has shields and torpedoes, as long as their motivations are right, as long as we get the idea behind them right, then the use of that violence will be justified. I mean, that is the assumption of American foreign policy for the last century. Well, I guess since World War II specifically. That assumption that forgets that having weapons, having a laser sword affects your motivations and affects your response to those who are less vulnerable. I mean, it's the classic thing of everything's a nail if the only tool you have is a hammer. So Star Trek at its best is about, and Star Wars at its best is about, has violence as a last resort. The difference there is, Star Trek is America, the benevolent, who does have the motivations right, the institution right, at least more traditional classic Star Trek, and we'll get to some things in a minute. Has the institutions right. Star Wars with the rebels, specifically with the rebels, is they don't have a choice. They have to take this violent action. There is no real other recourse. And even battle scars I'm reading now, talking about this small cell that has this conviction of saying, you don't do anything. The question in Bad Batch, right? We don't do
The
anything.
Empire is America.
So that's just it. Is yes and no, in that it kind of evades the question somewhat. Although there are a lot of people in the world, a lot of people in the United States who believe the American government is this oppressive totalitarian state, and their only choice, their only recourse, is violent confrontation. Now, whether or not that's true, the extent to which that's true, I mean, that is the great debate of globalization. We can also talk about China and Russia now being the ascendant powers. That's the extent to which that's true is also a debate for Congress and a debate for elections and how you vote. Are you the Federation or are you the Empire? And the reality is America is always both. At the same time, Canada's always both at the same time. We're kind of locked in this sense of self-interest in this use of military. But there is the conversation about sending tanks to Ukraine. And saying, okay, this is an oppressive action by the Russian government coming into Ukraine. We in the West have a responsibility to help stop it using NATO, using the UN. It's a fascinating thing then to ask, like Martin Luther King himself asked. In fact, I'd say Martin Luther King, his actual views were a lot closer to Star Wars, and I think George Lucas had more of his sense of things. And that I don't think Martin Luther King was an optimist; he was a realist. Here's the difference: is Star Wars is not optimistic. Star Wars did not assume that just because we have good intentions now doesn't mean we won't be corrupted in the future. Optimism is this belief, and I'm going to show my bias here, belief that, yeah, like I said, just because if we get the good intentions, and if we get the reason, the science right, then everything will be fine and everything will work out. We'll eradicate war, we'll eradicate poverty, we'll eradicate disease. Whereas Star Wars is able to question, okay, the means by which we seek to eradicate war and disease and hunger and poverty, are they going to also then create more problems for themselves? The means by which the Republic seeks to eradicate corruption, bureaucratic corruption, the chaos in the Outer Rim, is by becoming an empire. And so what Star Wars is not optimistic. Star Wars is hopeful. And what that is, and again, here I go, is
hope.
There is, I'm trying to word it in ways that can be more readily acceptable and widely acceptable. There are virtues, there are values, there are ways in which we ought to relate to each other. There are aspects, there are things in this world, maybe you believe that things that are beyond us, that limit our ability to limit our sense of our own sense of importance, but also then provide us with a sense of importance. Traditions call that the Force or God or whatnot. That by moving us towards those deeper truths of love and trust, that then in our own time with the thing we're called to do right in front of us, that can actually create some good, hopefully. Not perfectly, because that's the reality, but hopefully. And so when Jin says rebellions are built on hope, she doesn't say rebellions are built on optimism. Rebellions are built on hope. If we go for it together, well organized, maybe we can actually do something, make some change, little by little. Talking about battle scars, one of the interesting things, not quite a spoiler, just a theme, is they're just one cell, they're just one group. What big dent can they do? They can do their one little thing, And so they set it to do their one little thing. And hopefully that cascades, as we see with Rogue One. They do their one little thing that cascades into Luke destroying the Death Star, that then grows into ultimately the overthrow of the Empire, and bring it back to hopefully a New Republic that is ordered on more democratic lines, in the way that Mon Mothma, who we do trust, I think we do think. I mean, we even see her compromises in Andor, but she's ultimately doing the best she can. In contrast to someone like Luthen, who has given up, who is a pessimist, who doesn't actually value family and community. He tells this guy who has this family, you got to sacrifice it. In contrast to Saw Gerrera, they aren't hopeful. Saw Gerrera is optimistic. Saw Gerrera is optimistic that his violent crusade is the only thing necessary. He's up against the wall. His back up against the wall. I get that too. He feels like he has no choice, but he isn't looking ahead to what comes next. And Mon Mothma, more than anyone, even more than Leia, although Leia too, is always looking at what comes next. What are we called to do next? What are we going to build next? What are we going to build and not just tear down? This is how we win, not by killing what we hate, by saving what we love. Okay.
I think that's something I like about Star Wars. I don't want to oversimplify Star Trek because I don't want to make it sound like, I don't want to make it a either or situation. But I feel like Star Wars kind of knows that even if you do have good people in charge, like a Mon Mothma, like a Leia, I'd rather have them in charge of the galaxy than Palpatine any day. I think there's certainly an agreement on that. I hope. That doesn't automatically mean, everything's fine now. I got the right people in power, then all will be well. There are institutional problems. There are bureaucracies. There are just societal whole ways of thinking that don't go away. I don't want to say Star Trek is like that. I don't know, maybe it can feel that way, but I don't know. I maybe sometimes.
It is now more so, I'd say. But
okay. But no, you give a good point, I feel.
And I want to just clarify the point is, maybe this is the way of putting it. Star Trek, at least more classic Star Trek, is the good guys succeed because of their institutional support. Star Wars, the good guys succeed in spite of a lack of institutional support.
In a sense,
or they fail because of their institutional support in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. I think Star Wars, we talk about hope and optimism.
Mm-hmm.
I think Star Wars is, again, I always I hate doing this kind of like, I don't want to stand rivalry. I think Star Wars is kind of better at looking at those institutions a lot more than Star Trek can be. But this is where I feel like Deep Space, again, this is where I like Deep Space Nine. I feel like Deep Space Nine was the first time we actually started looking at, okay, what is Starfleet as an institution? What is Starfleet as an organization? Section 31 is like, if you kind of think about it, what is American intervention but imperialism to an extent?
Mm-hmm.
And Deep Space Nine is like, that was their whole thing with Section 31. Like even Admiral Ross was with Section 31. Like, yeah, he was preparing for the post-war where, Klingons, the Romulans will be their only rivals. So we got to get ready because they're going to be our rivals to our Dominion over the Alpha Quadrant. Supremacy. There was even going to be actually interesting. So I was watching the Deep Space Nine retrospective behind the scenes, and one of the specials that they got a bunch of writers, the old writers, back to like break down a future season 8 that they were never going to make, and they were going to have Section 31, and Section 31. Funny enough, they had an idea for like, what if Section 31 wants to destroy the wormhole and destroy the Bajoran religion, because in their mind, religion is the thing keeping them from embracing our ideology of utopian Federation Earth's thinking, and that's why they didn't join the Federation, and Bajor is a rival that we can't.
A security threat.
Security threat, basically. Starfleet. Someone said Starfleet is very much the white shirts in terms of the Federation's. But Section 31 are very much the dark gray shirts of like, we got time. You got to keep the utopia alive.
I just wanted to jump in there. So I'll let you finish first. Let me know.
No, I'm done.
Which I thought about. I've been thinking about Section 31 a bit because fascinating. So I'll spoil a little bit of the last Picard episode. I kind of mentioned this. So in it, there's a scene where it turns out kind of the big bad of the season. She's a changeling who was horribly experimented on during the Dominion War by Starfleet. Apparently, she does not at any point mention Section 31. She does not say, "Oh, this was just Section 31 doing this thing." It was she said Starfleet, and now it may be Section 31. Is because this brings up the question: is the purpose of it in Deep Space Nine is to I see it as this sort of ritual scapegoat. You're saying the nefarious secret ops, downright evil things that governments think they have to do in order to protect their people. Maybe they have to do to protect their people. Section 31 can do that over there. It can be carved out. People in Starfleet don't even really know about it. Very few people in Starfleet Command know about it. It serves to cleanse the rest of Starfleet's and the Federation's conscience while undergoing. And the people in Section 31, they self-consciously get that, right? They are Lutheran in that way, right?
Oh yeah.
The Republic, I don't even know if they really bother hiding it.
I don't think Star Wars itself bothers hiding it.
So they don't bother saying institutions will want the scapegoat to have their squeaky clean image. We know the Republic is doing weird cloning stuff with Camino before the Empire. The Republic is already doing that. Using biological warfare. Again, just thinking battle scars in my head. A planet that the Republic ends up exploiting. And then of course the Venators coming over the Lurman planet and then invading Mandalore, and everything that both say the Lurman and Mandalorians, for example, feared because why they were independent and why they wanted to be independent. Maybe even what Grief Karga is worried about a little bit. Chronologically that doesn't fit, but maybe why Grief Karga looks back. Anyway, my point being, what Lurman and Mandalorians feared totally came true. The Empire, these white clad troopers and their triangle hips, whether you call it Republic or Empire, they don't leave. They stay, they exploit, and they take over. As we saw Mandalore after the destruction, after the Night of 1,000 Tears. So, yeah, I mean, that's this funny contrast. There's this other side of this. This is other part of this equation, though. That one of the things I really appreciated about Strange New Worlds, for example, and Discovery Season 4, there still is room for more aspirational, not optimistic, but aspirational stories. And, that's the thing also that Star Trek does really well, and maybe better than Star Wars, is when they show, okay, this is what, well, maybe they both do it equally well. This is what happens when a crew works together to address a concern, solve a problem, or confront a challenge. When they do it with integrity, with complementarity of roles, and I don't mean a gender way, but complementary of a team working together, a team of different people. That does it well. I mean, maybe that's a parallel similarity. But I think Star Trek does it maybe on a larger scale.
I think Star Trek does it because it believes the entire institution of Starfleet is good. Especially like Roddenberry's whole belief of like, humans don't have petty differences anymore. We got rid of those.
Yeah.
We don't use money anymore. we don't accumulate things, despite Picard being a collector of things, collector of wine. For some reason, he doesn't like children, so like contradictory there.
I mean, he also makes wine.
But that's true. He makes wine. You know, I think it's very much Roddenberry's kind of just more. He's going full on, where it's like high-minded. Earth is utopia. Like, I don't think in Roddenberry's canon, you know, Section 31, the Federation would do this. It's like, no, we did it. Human race, we good. We did it. Utopia. I think Star Wars does inspirational stories. I think it is as aspirational. It's just never like the New Republic is this really true beacon of goodness in the world. It's here is the Ghost Crew. They work together. They are family. They look out for each other. Here is Din and Grogu, family of 2. They look out for each other, you know. Here is the Resistance. Here's Rey, Finn, and Poe. They went through a lot, but they're still love each other. You know, the peoples of the galaxy coming to take on exocultures. They're like, nope, we don't want your Palpatine back. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Right. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka.
Yeah, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka.
And Rex and Cody.
You know, even though, you know, we know where that will all eventually end up, I think you can be aspirational even in the times of darkness. You know,
that's kind of my point. Yeah.
Obi-Wan being inspired by Leia. Like, Leia is his hope to kind of get out of his you know, dunk and sees his old master Qui-Gon again. It's like, oh, yeah, Qui-Gon. So I think that certainly, I don't want to say Star Trek's like in denial, but I just think again that's sort of like Roddenberry came very much from America, maybe like too much of the this is what good America looks like, without really kind of thinking of the consequences of kind of like where that can lead, where it's like 1 minute it's good and then another minute is got to invade Iraq, Saddam's got WMPs, but we're going to bring democracy to Iraq. I think Star Wars be a little bit more critical of that, and I think Lucas is very much warning, like, hey, the Republic can become the Empire. It can't be safe, but you know, got big corporations and Trade Federation, Amazon, and whatnot it's coming down. Though I think I think it is, as you say, optimism versus hopefulness. Yeah. Or George, I don't think is like. Maybe George can be a little bit cynical. I don't know what his personal feelings on the world are going. But like maybe he's hopeful that people will, you know, keep the good fight going. But you know, I think there's that difference there.
I mean, George has his $4 billion paycheck from Disney. I think I think he gave most of it to charity anyway. But I mean, maybe another way of putting this is they're just tapping into two different ways of inspiring people to a better society, to better lives, moral inspiration. Star Trek is the exemplar. And that's what I mean by the aspirational. At its best, at its most classic, I'd say. Star Wars is the cautionary tale, especially the prequel trilogy.
Oh yeah,
the cautionary tale of what happens when you trust institutions too much, and so yeah, it's what and maybe it's not cynical. It's realist and hopeful within realism, and whatnot. I mean, the thing is, optimism, barrage, sylvain certainty. It can motivate you, but it can also be snuffed out by darkness. Hope can actually carry on in darkness by believing, that my choices matter in what I do. But again, Star Trek does that as well. So I don't know. I mean, again, I love Trek. I don't want to bash too much, but I mean, it is why I found Star Wars more compelling. Why it's interesting that new Trek is going in this direction as well. Maybe it's tapped into something more compelling. We'll see.
I mean, I think when Gene Roddenberry died, I think a lot of that was Roddenberry's unique view of the world. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, well, in his time. I mean, he wasn't that unique for his time, but
that's true. With the 60s. We were all hopeful. We were all optimistic at the time. What was I going to say? I think it's just different philosophies. And kind of evolving. Like, can you evolve? I think with Star Trek, it's like, can it evolve beyond the Cold War 60s, 70s, 60s JFK kind of Camelot notion, which, as a society, retroactively speaking, we're looking back on that and asking ourselves, did Camelot even exist? A lot of younger people like myself, obviously, kind of look back on that like, no, I don't think it ever existed. There was no such thing as Camelot when you had Jim Crow and, still, all that violence in 68.
You got that Harvey Milk and MLK.
Yeah, I think something we overcomplicate it, where it's like, it was World War II, just war. Yeah, yes, it was. You should kick the, who's behind.
Which DS9 explores, right?
Yeah, Dominion, no good. I know, and it's like, yeah, fight the Galactic Empire, kick Palpatine's behind, take him down, buddy. I do think you're right. I think Star Wars kind of has that realism of society is just one of the cycle of construction and self-destruction. Like, you got your good periods, and then the Roman Empire falls, and then things kind of come back up with the Renaissance, and then and then World War I happens.
Or even then, it's not so much cyclical, but there's always both. I mean, there's a classic Christian tradition, the wheat and the tares. This is a story that Jesus tells about a farmer, and the way, I guess maybe the way agriculture works sometimes, or the way ancient Near Eastern agriculture worked. Sometimes you had to let the wheat grow, with the tares meaning the weeds, the other stuff. You just let the wheat grow, let the land grow with the stuff, the not so desirable stuff. I mean, a cornfield, there's a bit of the corn, and then there's all the other stuff that comes up around it. Only at the end of time does the wheat and the weeds get separated out. And so we can either be wheat or we can be weeds. We can live in love and hope, or we can be in self-interest and fear and destructiveness. And also that exists within us. They both exist within. There's that's the Protestant Reformation really went deep into that. Here I go again, Matthew. That within us we have both light and dark, and what do we listen to? Yes, people talk about balance and self-interest, self-preservation being dark only if it takes over, only if it's the thing you devote your life to, either through violence or fear. Star Wars says this isn't always the question before us, and Star Trek does in its own way. It's just not maybe as explicitly.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how modern Trek's not using Section 31 as a scapegoat. I'm trying to think though. Weren't there like classic episodes of Star Trek where like one of the where captains would go crazy? Like,
well, it's the incompetent Commodores, right?
No, I think even there's like the original Captain Pike went crazy.
He got confined to, like, he was in a different. He didn't go crazy. I forget how to describe it. He gets basically stuck in a coma the rest of his life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was. I thought there was something there. Although to be fair, I think when people think of like institutional optimism of Trek, I think a lot of that does come with TNG, where for what I've heard, Roddenberry's allowed to go full force. Again, humans, we don't have we're a happy, completely beyond anger, petty differences and whatnot. That's when Roddenberry decided, allowed to go full hog on his universe.
I mean, again,
it's quite interesting.
He was giving an example of what society could be, what it could become, what we're actually capable of, if we just listen to the light. I mean, that's maybe again the difference. Roddenberry says what could happen if we do. George is saying, well, we don't always do. Here is another example of what could happen when we do. Again, they're both ways of moral storytelling that just take different tacks.
No, you're right. I agree. I mean, again, that's why I always feel like the weird rivalry between Trek and Wars is always so weird. It's like they're different things. They're trying to do different things. They're not meant to be the same thing, people. So let me check my notes just to make sure, because I think
I put it a few. There's two kind of weird parallels I want to get into a little bit. Sure. One of them is the High Republic.
That's true.
At least phase 1 of the High Republic. I mentioned this a little bit before, but I mean, Charles Soule, he talked about how the idea was Camelot. We are all the Republic. That is, I mean, very much we're all the Federation. And the Jedi Order, here's the parallel there, of course. Guardians of Peace and Justice in the Galaxy. Marshal Avar Kriss going out and being the hero of Hetzel, saving the day by uniting all the Jedi together. Very much this ideal of the Republic. Even Starlight Beacon is very much a Star Trek thing of let's have all the diversity of the galaxy, all the different peoples of the galaxy come together, and you can go in and you can encounter people who are different, people who live in different ways, different kind of habitats, like aboard a Federation starship or a Federation starbase. Kind of see that similar idea emerge. Another one I wanted to just briefly dwell on, my experience of reading the Thrawn 2017 canon novel is I was reading it, I'm in it, I listened to the audiobook by Mark the Cannon, Legend Thompson, of course Timothy's on, and the way Thrawn and especially Eli Vanto move through this story, you see the Empire having this role as explorers, encountering Thrawn, knowing Cybisti, the trade language, having first contact procedures when they discover him, not immediately shooting on sight because he's weird and different, because they have first contact procedures, and this is what you do. What if they could be advantageous to us? What if this could be actually a diplomatic relationship? That possibility, not an exploitative one. Opening the possibility in the Empire, the Galactic Empire. And maybe this does tie back to, say, Outbound Flight and the Legends novels. Another similarity, we mentioned the naval chain of command. Star Wars doesn't really go into it all that much, by and large. Doesn't go into the way, just almost neutrally, as the Imperial Starfleet as neutrally, just as this institution that Thrawn and Vanto have to navigate through, even their academy training. It really, just even that alone just helps make it feel more like Star Trek, because Trek does go into all that stuff. It does go into navigating this institution, because in that case, the institution is doing its work, a good work. Makes it just felt more familiar, tapped into that, leading us then, of course, to cheer for Thrawn, Vanto as our insert character. We connect with him, we relate to him. He's on the outside. They're both these outsiders who find their way in. Especially, your Lauren is more understanding, more welcoming. Palpatine himself has these audiences with Palpatine, and there's this understanding between them that does or doesn't fit with the rest of canon. Does it fit with the Rebels Thrawn? I don't know, but we actually are made to feel, at least, even in that encounter with the rebel on that planet, that Thrawn has to deal with in that first novel. We even with Governor Price, to some extent, she's actually helping him out, helping navigate the political institution. We feel like this military structure, oddly enough, is on the side of justice and pursuing truth, which, again, maybe that's just breaking canon. Maybe that's something weird.
No,
or is it just exploring this other aspect? And certainly Thrawn and Vanto's perspective on it, and their in-universe character development through it. Because at no point does Thrawn actually break faith with the Empire. We speculate maybe we know he's using the Empire to try and deal with the Grisks, but It was this weird, different thing that I had encountered. Felt a lot more like Federation, like Star Trek.
Oh, you should then read the original
Mhm.
Tim Zahn 1991 because that's always been Zahn's thing. He's always been very more sci-fi,
Yeah.
military command, hierarchy kind of a thing. Like we got Captain Pelion, sort of the
Mhm.
the side as sort of Thrawn's
yeah.
character. Very grand strategy campaigns.
Mhm.
Even a little bit more on the New Republic side as well. We get a little bit of that.
Mhm.
Between
Like even-
divisions between the military under Akbar and more the political side under Borsk Thalia.
Right.
So
Kind of
yeah,
like the Rogue Squadron novel series, things like that, or the X-Wing novel series.
Yeah, Stackpole and Zahn are kind of more the military,
Yeah,
kind of harder sci-fi people. Excuse me, but yeah, Tim Zahn could easily write a great Star Trek novel.
Yeah.
I think he would be good. Yeah, I can see where you might come from in terms of like, there's very much this is how you command a ship. There's like, phasers lock on target, that sort of thing, or hyperspace jumps. So yeah, I definitely get those those vibes.
I mean, I think maybe what I'm getting at is we get into the head, we see the logic of these Imperial officers using the institution. I mean, it's a little different with Santa Ray, for example, in Lost Stars, because we also get Thane and his rebel story. But yeah, with Thrawn and Vanto, we like this is what they set out to do. This is what they hope to do. This is what they believe they're supposed to do right, and we're taken along for that journey. The way in Star Trek we're often taken along for that journey in these military chains of command.
Yeah. And Zahn's very much kind of classic sci-fi chain of command kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So I can definitely. It's what makes his stuff definitely stand out. That's for sure. Maybe almost to the point where it's like, is this Star Wars at this point? Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's like, because the rest of Star Wars isn't like this. That's for sure.
No. I mean, the Ascendancy stuff. I mean, the Ascendancy trilogy. That's just so off the beaten path. But like I said a few weeks ago, I feel like I'm taking a break from Star Wars when I'm reading it. It's just something else entirely.
Oh no, I mean that's why I think it's actually pretty cool because here's your corner of the world's on, dude, go nuts.
He's built himself, which is great.
Yeah, he's kind of always been building itself. It's now it's like more official. But no, I can see that. We're gonna have a lot of gonna be very interesting in terms of forget Uncanny Plateau. If Lars Mikkelsen looks good, characterization wise, I think Thrawn's gonna be, Filoni writes Thrawn very differently if Rebels with anything to go by. So
Thrawn in Rebels is more Star Wars. It's just a different kind of villain, but a foil for these rebels who are up against it.
Yeah. And I think that'll be very interesting to kind of, that'll be interesting to talk about. But no, I totally get what you're getting at there. And I'd love to have you read the original Heir of the Empire.
I really should.
Just because you can see that was like Thrawn really the villain in that book, but also you get more of kind of Tim Zahn's military kind of viewpoints of things.
Yeah, I've read the comic book adaptation, but
yeah, I mean, that's good too. I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty good. But I would read the book.
Yeah. Well, I have copies of it. I just so much canon to get through. Come on.
I know, but we should make a time. We should definitely mark a calendar date on it. But yeah, were there any other points you want to make? I think I went through all mine.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I love Star Trek. I'm really intrigued by New Trek and the way it is navigating this question of, is it going to still be aspirational? How can it show a bit of cynicism? Maybe this is another thing, is Star Wars is hopeful amidst realism and stark cynicism. New Trek is trying to tell compelling stories that are aspirational, but have a more realist, cynical side to them, strain to them. that both of them, I mean, are ways of people connecting with what is a very much a more cynical age, especially the last 2 years, last 5-6 years.
I'll
What do we
I'll
find? And
challenge.
then there's Battlestar Galactica, throws everything in the mix there. Ron Moore ditching Star Trek for that, but anyway.
I'll debate one aspect about the cynicism thing, which I don't know if I agree with completely about Star Wars. I think to me, cynicism would be if a Star Wars movie ends and the message and the theme is the Empire won. That's it. Nope. There's nothing we can do. Oh well, time to go home. Just sit in bed all day. That to me is true cynicism. Like Star Wars has never done that. Empire might have even Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith, the Empire won, but your final scene is Luke Skywalker and baby Leia. They are the hope of the future.
Twin
sons exit out.
Yeah.
So that to me is why I don't think Star Wars is.
No.
Star Wars. I think realism is a better word than cynicism. To me, cynicism mean just give up, go home.
There are
Game
cynical stories out there, for sure. That's definitely fair. Star Wars is hopeful, fundamentally.
Hope.
Yeah.
But I guess one more point because I realized you didn't bring it up. Backtrack a little bit, but I don't care. It's the show. Starfleet Academy got announced.
Oh yeah.
Very, very exciting because I've been hearing about this for ever, and I feel like this has been one of those things that the Trekkies they've always wanted to do the show, and now they're doing it.
I saw a meme. It was like, weren't they going to do a show about Shaw? Isn't Michelle Yeoh going to do her Philippa George's Section 31 show? Who knows?
Yeah.
April Fools. There
we got a comment though from Mr. Thomas Balzer before we exit out. Each of the species in Trek eventually came to represent aspects of humans. For example, Ferengi represented the human greed from current times. It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Then I think we didn't cover this one. There's friends who love Star Wars but really hate Star Trek for some reason. Weird.
I mean,
I like it
their
all.
own, but
to each their own. I like it all. But yeah, this was a good discussion. I think we're pretty good. Unless you have any final things to say, are you good?
I kind of want to start a Star Trek podcast now. I don't know.
I would love to join a Star Trek podcast, honestly, but I don't have Paramount Plus, so I would have to do all the old stuff.
And I don't have time.
I know.
Yeah, it's fun times. Well, all right. I guess it's a good time to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining, for watching, for commenting in the comments. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. Do you find Star Trek or Star Wars more compelling? Do you find them both equally compelling for different ways, for similar ways? Let us know. Comment in the comments below on all the social channels in YouTube. That's not going anywhere. Comment away. Or let us know on Twitter or Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, and on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube page or Facebook page. Please do give this video a like and a share. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID2021, again, JID2021 on Twitter, or at the Ion Cannon Pod on Twitter. Also, follow us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. This Friday, we will be having a movie night. We'll be watching Captain America, The Winter Soldier.
Speaking of realism and hopefulness and all that stuff. You can follow me on Twitter. Institutions. Oh yeah, they go for it too. We got to do a Star Wars Marvel crossover. That's ripe for something. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at NEUG485, on Instagram at MNEUG1138. You'll get more soccer there, more Star Wars, more Star Trek, all the above, and of course Twitter, Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. Next week we are, as promised, we're doing the Bad Batch season review, looking back on the whole season, giving our thoughts, giving our feels, etc. But for now, set phasers to stun. Let's blow this thing and head home.
Live long and